Call the meeting to order. Al, can you do roll call, please?
Sarda.
Here.
Ferdig.
Here.
Minor.
Here.
Mosier.
Here.
Schramm.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Mayor Johnson.
Here.
City Manager Leon.
Here.
City Attorney Denver. Here.
All right, well, thank you everyone for being here under these unusual circumstances. The first thing on our agenda is public appearances, so if there is anyone here that would like to address the commission about something not on today's agenda, now would be the time to do that. I don't see anyone in the audience, so I know Amy would like to say a few things during this time.
Sure. Honorable Mayor, members of the Commission, and people in the public, just so everyone's aware, our March 23rd work session, we are changing the topic, so we have uninvited Lisa Marceau. We'll probably be doing an update on everything that's happening around here, so still plan to come. We will have access to the Career Manufacturer Technical Education Center, so please come there at 6 o'clock. I'm guessing we're going to be updating everyone on how things are progressing here and some of the things we're doing. In terms of the city election, as far as we know, that is still on. That could change anytime. That is probably something only the governor has an authority to change. I would say that if you have questions about the election or you're a candidate for the election, you should call the Secretary of State's office. The more feedback that they get, the more likely that's going to push them to, make some announcements. But being that's a few weeks away, I think there's probably some time there. The police department has changed a number of things in their operations. If there's calls that don't really require an in-person response, one example would be a bike theft. We have the school resource officer, Officer Chrissy, at the desk. He can take information, ask for if there's a picture of the bike, a description, when was the last thing. They can do those types of things without sending an officer there. They're also doing their best not to go into homes. Typically our police department is a real, friendly and sort of interactive police department, but during this time they're, asking people if they can step out as opposed to going to them directly or going within their homes, just to minimize contact as much as possible. We have minimized access to our buildings. As you probably have seen when you walked into our building, we had some signs that said, hey, if you can do business with us today by not coming in, please do so. So we are open, but we've asked people not to access the gym. We have a lot of walkers and kids that come in and play. That type of thing. We're also asking our staff not to travel unless it's related to work, and also minimize going to buildings that you don't typically need to go into. So typically, for example, the guys from the fire department will come in and get their mail daily. We've said, hey, we'll get it to you if it's urgent. Just minimizing the contact. Let's use phone and email and the technology we have available. Of course, no events, programming, all those types of things. We've canceled a lot of or postponed a lot of our meetings that we have, group meetings, as well as things like our seed library or open swim, things like that. The library and the Summit Activity Center are closed until further notice. We're keeping abreast of what the CDC is recommending, and we're also in contact with the school. We want to be consistent throughout the community. I'll be working with information services, information technology services, for options for work from home where that makes sense. Now, obviously, we can't have police officers that work from home, or there's other folks that can't do that. But for those that can, if it makes sense, we certainly will work with them. We also have a 3D plan, which I've been kind of calling in my mind is 3x3. It's not just 3 people, but also people, places, and things. So, for example, our meeting location is the CTME building. If that doesn't work, we will meet here in City Hall Meeting Room B, and if that doesn't work for some reason, we'll meet in Fire Station 2. We'll also are working on our calling capabilities and teleconferencing, so if a couple of you maybe can't come or don't feel well, and we need to have a quorum for a meeting, we'll provide ability to do that. One benefit of having 9 is certainly that we can do business with 5 of you. So, you know, if you have childcare or you're not feeling well, don't come to a meeting. That's all, it should be obvious. Also, in terms of our 3D plan, I've talked to each of the department heads about, okay, in your absence, who's gonna be running your division? Who's gonna be, in their absence, who will run that? Make sure you have 2 people behind you that have enough information to manage your department, manage your division, just as a good practice for us. We're prioritizing our work, so just as an example, I have not worked on the flag project this week, so hope not to disappoint, but we'll pick that back up when we have less pressing things to do. It's important but not urgent, and that's where we're prioritizing there. Of course, we're utilizing that COVID-19 800 number and asking employees to contact that if they have specific questions about the virus. We're also telling people that 211 has a lot of resources, local resources for them. We have the benefit through our health provider, which is Avera Health Plans, to have telemedicine option for our employees. It's an app called Avera Now. Not only does it offer on-demand health services, but also offers EAP, so employee assistance for folks. It changes the game when we've got people that are first responders that, you know, are going into situations where people may be sick, and there's other people who are just plain concerned and fearful, and that's understandable. And I would also note that this is stressful. You know, we're building a plane while we're flying it a little bit here, so that's something that's going to be available for our employees, and we're going to promote that in our organization to help people get that technology uploaded or downloaded or provided to them so they can use that. Brad Bees and Todd Brandt are our main PIOs, Public Information Officers. So we are sending communication through them that's going on our Facebook, that's going out to you know, the radio or the media. They're running things through me. We're meeting more than once a day, really, so we're in constant communication there. So we'd ask that folks, you know, we have a lot of good support with our media, but we'd like everything to have one voice. So we ask that, you know, you run things either through me, and we'll package them and get them out to Brad and Todd, and they'll help us get that out from our institution. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about a health board and a health officer, and we'll talk about a little bit more of that when we come to the emergency declaration portion. We have, with Avera's help, found a solution for domestic violence folks that might need some assistance, as well as folks that maybe don't have a place to live, and you know, you don't want to put them in the homeless shelter if they're not feeling well. So Avera has helped us with some of those types of questions that we just didn't have solutions for. I'll be talking to you a little more as we go along, but of course we're telling employees, if you are sick, you stay home. Don't come to work. Give us a call and make sure we know about it, and then contact a health provider over the phone or, you know, electronically, and they'll give them the next steps and support. So we're working through those situations as they come up case by case. I've talked a little bit with department heads about the fact that we do have policies and programs for sick leave and those types of things, but once we are in this emergency state, I think we can be a little flexible with people, so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. I just don't want anyone to feel pressure that they should be here if they're running a temperature because they don't have sick time. I mean, we don't want that, obviously, for the health of everybody, so trying to be careful there. I don't want to say bend the rules, but I want to say flex a little bit so that we're keeping the priority of health and family members' health first, and really the operations second, because we do have other folks that can help support. We're not, however, are not just working on COVID-19. This is a great time to remind people, since you're home, there's no excuse not to fill out your census form. You can have a census party while you're home with your family. I know I received mine last week. Other folks probably did too, so no excuses now. You're home, fill that out. There's a couple emails in your Dropbox, excuse me, not in your Dropbox, in your OneDrive, pertaining to 5th Street. These are some communications from individuals that came through our city email as well. I think there's one about some lighting We haven't reached out specifically on every one of those emails yet. We will. Again, it's been prioritized. There may be a solution on Fifth Street, so the Winters who came to the meeting last week, we may be able to work with them a little bit, but there's no guarantee. So I think there's some information that, everything's perfect now. We always have, since the beginning of the project, we'll work with people the best we can, and we'll continue to do that as well. So there's some information as well on some of the things we're going to talk about later on in your Dropbox, including the resolution. The resolution, if you haven't seen it, we just finished it this morning, is there's a paper copy back there as well for you. So I'll certainly answer questions too from the media or from you all if you have them.
Commissioners, any questions for the city manager at this time? Okay. Well, I just want to set the stage before we move on to approve or considering the resolution. So I wanted to set the stage as to why I called for this meeting today. So this sounds strange to say, but in the interest of public health, we've got to unite in spirit as a community right now to physically keep ourselves apart. That's right, we've got to come together to stay apart. Usually when we're fighting an enemy, we can see it approaching and we gather to repel it. With COVID-19, we can't see it, smell it, touch it, or hear it. By the time people begin falling seriously ill to it, we will already be behind. We've already seen great community spirit. Restaurants offering meals to children, churches canceling services, and businesses making it easier for people to do what they need with the least amount of contact possible. These are the small ways we can be heroes during this national emergency. By now, you've probably heard many health officials say that if we do this right, it will look, in retrospect, as if we've overreacted. If we are not quick and serious about measures to make sure people are practicing social distancing, we could end up facing a situation like they have in Italy. Over the weekend, Italy reported 368 deaths due to COVID-19 in one 24-hour period. Their healthcare facilities are straining under the weight. Italy and other European nations have begun closing bars, restaurants, and many other public spaces. Americans need to prepare for that possibility in our country. In fact, in some places, we're already seeing those measures being taken. The city of Yankton may have to make decisions in the coming weeks that none of us sitting here ever dreamed we'd be considering. We never imagined we'd have to declare a state of emergency for a pandemic, though experts have warned for years that this was possible. We never imagined that we would have to close the Summit Activity Center and the Yankton Community Library for potentially weeks. We never dreamed that we might not have an election on the second Tuesday of April. Now those things have happened or are being discussed. These are not normal times. This is not a drill. It is not a hoax. One expert, Dr. Michael Ryan of the World Health Organization, and who has experience dealing with Ebola, advises those in emergency management to be fast, have no regrets. You must be the first mover. The virus will get you if you don't move quickly. If you need to be right before you move, you will never win. Perfection is the enemy of good in emergency management. The greatest error is not to move. The greatest error is to be paralyzed by the fear of failure. So I hope the community recognizes that through the actions we've already taken, that the city of Yankton and our partners across Yankton County are not paralyzed by fear. We are compelled to action based on the evidence and advice we have from health officials. Now we've seen other governments around the world deal with this virus. The actions we take now have the potential to save lives and prevent our healthcare system from being overburdened with too many patients at once who need care. That is the single greatest danger. That's why we must slow the spread and flatten the curve. A term I'm sure you've heard that refers to having people get infected over a longer period of time rather than all at once. Healthcare experts are quick to remind us that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Different communities will be impacted in different ways at different times. Yankton and Yankton County will have to make decisions that are right for us based on what we are seeing in our communities. As I said earlier, we need to unite in spirit to physically keep ourselves apart. We need to stay calm. We need to practice good hygiene. We need to look out for one another. Don't be selfish and hoard items. There's absolutely no reason for that. Society will be slowed, but it will not be broken as long as we all do what is asked of us. Change the way you live your life for the weeks ahead. Practice the golden rule. We'll get through this, and I think we'll be a stronger city and nation. So I hope that helps explain the reason I had for asking the city manager to call this meeting today. With that, we move on to new business, which is resolution 20-21 regarding proposing a COVID-19 state of emergency declaration for the city of Yankton. What is your pleasure?
Move to approve the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion on this item?
Are you gonna kind of walk through some of the basics and parts behind it, especially as tied to number 3? Is that gonna be explained before we go through how it's all together?
So, yes, so since we drafted this, completed drafting this morning, I think first of all we should read it, and then I think Ross and I both have some comments we'd like to make. Whereas on March 11th, 2020, World Health Organization declared COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas Ordinance 1126 of the Yankton Code of Ordinances confers upon State of South Dakota Board of Health full power to take such steps necessary as may be necessary for the prevention of the introduction of the spread of infections, contagious or pestilential, Amy Minor, help me out. Pestilential diseases within the city of Yankton, and the power to promulgate, with the approval of the Board of Commissioners, such rules and regulations for the prevention of the spread of contagious diseases and regarding sanitary condition of the city as it may deem proper and necessary. And whereas the Center for Disease Control and Prevention recommends certain actions for the preparation and mitigation of community transmission of the COVID-19, including social distancing measures. Now therefore may it be resolved that the City Commissioners for the City of Yankton, South Dakota, do hereby declare a state of emergency in the City of Yankton, South Dakota, due to the spread of the virus causing the COVID-19 disease, and be it resolved by the Board of City Commissioners of the City of Yankton, South Dakota, that the following recommendations shall be put into place as it relates to COVID-19 are hereby adopted as follows. 1. Gatherings in city buildings shall be limited as recommended by the CDC and other health authority or city health officer. And Ross will visit about that in a little bit. 2. Private organizations are encouraged to similarly limit the size of their gatherings and cancel events as appropriate. 3. The city manager shall appoint an appropriate city health officer to exercise the powers of that position as set forth in Chapter 11 of the Yankton Code of City Ordinances. And 4. The city manager shall convene the Board of Health to exercise its powers as set forth in Ordinance Section 11-32 to prevent the spread of the virus causing the COVID-19 disease within the city of Yankton. So that's the resolution. I'll let Ross talk a little bit about our ordinance as it pertains to a city health officer and what that individual can and cannot do and some of the options there for you.
Okay, so if anyone was interested, they could look up Chapter 11 of the Yankton Code of Ordinances, and they would find some arcane provisions. These were passed back 76 years ago, at a time when disease spread quite a bit more readily than it does today. In the code, we've created a position for a health officer, an individual appointed by the city manager, and the duties of the health officer is general supervision over the sanitary conditions of the city and all matters affecting the general health of citizens thereof. We haven't had much need for a health officer in town. the duties are beyond just the scope of slowing the spread or preventing the spread of disease. There's also the role of eliminating unsanitary, unhealthful conditions within the city. So we've used this position for code enforcement purposes if there's derelict structures that are potential risks for rat harborages and things of that nature. We've had a health officer that has typically been someone in code enforcement or building inspection, things of that nature. But under the circumstances we have today, that role is probably better filled by somebody with infectious disease control experience or potentially a medical doctor, somebody who has the right knowledge and expertise to help us deal with the COVID-19 spread. The health officer also is a voting member of what was referred to as the City Health Board. That board is made up of the city manager, the mayor, and the city health officer, as well as ex officio or non-voting members of essentially city staff with inspection duties. So the way we're interpreting that is the city manager may identify appropriate members of staff that would help guide that committee. But the powers of that committee are quite broad. That committee has the full power to take such steps as may be necessary for the prevention of the introduction or spread of infections, contagious or pestilential diseases within the city. And within that structure, they have the power to promulgate, with the approval of the Board of Commissioners, such rules and regulations for the prevention of the spread of contagious diseases and regarding the sanitary condition of the city as it may deem proper and necessary. And any rule that's promulgated by the Board of Health shall, upon its approval by the Board of Commissioners, have the same force and effect as though it were an ordinance of the city. So that gives the health board the power to make recommendations that, once this group approves the recommendations, have the force and effect of law. That would give us the power to perhaps enforce a quarantine or an isolation, things of that nature, if that's an appropriate recommendation by the board as this unfolds.
So I want to talk a little bit more about that, and then I have a few other things. So I have not appointed, the other health official, nor have I appointed any ex officios, because I mean, there's quite a bit of levity here, and authority. So if this resolution passes, then what I would probably do is put that, naming that committee, naming that board on the agenda Monday. I want to give some thought and talk with some actual health experts as to who are the best people in our community, and I'm kind of looking at Doug Eckert in the back that he might help me have that conversation, to identify who might be the best folks to have there, and then who's the best folks on our team to have there as well. By that time, we may even have a meeting that we want to schedule, just based on what happens in our community over the next, few days. If we have to speed that up, we certainly can. The mayor can call another special meeting if we have to speed that up. But I feel like it's important enough that we should, when we name that committee, have the chance for people to come to, this is a public meeting, we come to a public meeting that's noticed there at the regular time and, talk with you. Based on the mayor's comments earlier, I'm not gonna wait if it looks like we need to do it right away, but I think it's important so people don't get misled. I already had a call over the weekend saying, do you guys really have a coronavirus police force? Well, that's, we don't have that. I don't know what that means, but I don't want there to be some misunderstanding that this health board is gonna knock on everybody's door and, tell them you have to stay in, or knock on a business's door and say you can't open. So I want to make sure that, we have a community discussion, even though this is serious, that I think we have enough time to do that. If we don't feel like we have enough time, we'll springboard it into action sooner, but we're really, 7 days away from this. So you guys can talk about that unless you want us to act sooner. The other things that I want to say is that I think this declaration gives us some other tools as well. If at some point, this isn't available now, but if at some point FEMA or another federal agency has some assistance or has some support available, while it may not be required, I think it's probably beneficial that you guys have some formal action that we've said this is an emergency and I have that support of the elected officials before an application for a request goes in. I think secondly too, we have clauses in our personnel manual and our CBA, collective bargaining agreement, about emergency situations. We're not going to be following things by the letter here once we, in an emergency situation. And if we have gotten to a place where we have a lot of staff gone and I had to reassign somebody, I don't want to then have, somebody come back to us and say, well, I should get Al's pay because I worked in the finance office for, 2 weeks or whatever. So I just I think having you guys say publicly, yes, this is an emergency, gives a little more authority and support in backing and us making some decisions here internally. And then lastly, I think there's some optics here to think about. I hope that other businesses and other organizations are taking this seriously, and I think they're looking for leadership on, well, what are we supposed to be doing? We're not experts in manufacturing plants maybe, or what to be doing in terms of a small business, but I think that if folks are looking for a lead, they can see what we're doing and what we're implementing, and maybe that gives them a little more guidance. There is a task force, but that's helping in each different areas, nonprofits, etc. But I think having you guys take an action sort of helps to move everyone else further down the line a little bit and say, yes, okay, this is a situation we have to pay attention to. So with that, I'll let you guys discuss and ask more questions of Ross and I if you have them. And then I guess take your action.
Russ, I do have a question about the health board. So, in some cities they are telling bars and restaurants that they have to close. If we don't get that direction from the national or state level with the health board, if our local medical officials are saying that's an action we need to take, could we?
It would be a recommendation by the health board approved by this commission would be able to make that law temporarily.
So I guess I'd like some clarity on passing or not passing this resolution. I mean, from what I've heard, that a lot of the things, well, pretty much everything is not necessarily required by the resolution to take care of. What, if this were not to pass for some reason, what are the repercussions? What can't we do that you just discussed?
I don't think there's anything we can't do. We could still do a health board. We could still. My personal feeling is that having you guys come together and say, yes, this is an emergency situation. It's we need to take additional action. Gives a little more credence to any action that the commission may take based on the health board's recommendation. Otherwise, what I can do is I can get together with the mayor after work and Dave Mingo, and we can start making recommendations. And while I think they're solid, I think we would want to have some folks that have pretty good background in health and that are experts in health to make those. And I guess until Ross started looking into it too, I didn't actually know if we could do that. But probably nothing really is the honest answer, but I think it's a good protocol because we are taking such a serious action. Also, for example, with the flood, we needed a flood disaster declaration to move forward. I don't know if there's funding yet, or if, moving forward, or if there's support gonna be coming forward to us. It'd be nice to have a declaration already taken care of, so that could be something. I can say there's an emergency, this is an emergency situation, and I can go ahead and make some changes in personnel if I need to, without, we do that with the weather, if it's a bad snowstorm, I say this is an emergency, we're gonna do some things differently. We're gonna be doing things differently now for a prolonged period of time, and I think it would probably legally benefit us if we got challenged in the future, to have that support. But could we do everything without it? I think so. I think we could. I think it's probably a good idea to do, but again, that's up to you guys that make that decision.
I would like to say that I think it's important that we work together. Having been in the classroom the last week, answering 17,000 questions about what's next, what's going on, who's in charge, what is this? This resolution may not technically change actions that we take, but it gives our community a clear direction to look for leadership. And I think that's what we need right now.
I look at it like you mentioned the flood last year, Amy, how, no one saw that coming, obviously, and this is the same way. You didn't think of this 4 weeks ago that we'd be sitting here discussing this, and there's a lot of unknowns in the future, and I think this puts some things in place that will help us later on, so whether it be grants, applying for funding, just starting this process is a good step. Thank you guys for thinking of doing it, and with all the other leaders in the community also.
It's good to see a proactive response from city, but also community leaders for this situation. I think it does help lend to some guidance and maybe some clarity at least on these unknown times.
There's a lot of information circulating, and we all know some of it is accurate and some of it is not. And the more we can come together and convey accurate information clearly, regularly to our citizens, the better off we all will be.
I think a lot of people are looking for permission to not do things, not hold events, and that's part of what this action does. It makes clear to them that leaders are taking this seriously. And the CDC just last night issued a guideline that events of 50 or more should not be held. Things like that are changing by the day, and they will continue to change. So, by coming together and recognizing how unusual the circumstance is and that we are all together and trying to address it, I do think that offers clarity to people as they are looking for what they should do in their own lives.
So my biggest concern is by passing this, and I'm not saying I'm against it, my biggest concern is the impact it'll have on the citizens, the small business, the community as a whole. There's a portion of our community that's already freaking out.
And so what are your specific concerns?
Everything, financially. Schools are closed, and I understand that, and I don't have a problem with that, but people gotta take care of their children. Daycare are closed. You stay home to take care of your children, you're not going to work. People can't, if they don't have employees, or if they don't have customers, they can't stay open.
It's like what Nathan said, this is an uncharted territory.
I realize we're right at the beginning of it, but the last thing I wanna do is add on to the hysteria by passing an ordinance that doesn't really do a whole lot besides, it doesn't tie our hands for anything, whether we pass it or not, besides say, I'm for everything in the ordinance, right? And there's nothing there that we can't do with that by passing. That's my biggest concern.
So do you disagree that we are in a state of emergency? Somewhat, just by the fact that and I'm not saying that the state of emergency might not be here at a certain point, but as of, as of Saturday, there was
with 6 in the state of South Dakota, 8, 9,
confirmed cases.
10. At what point does it become a state emergency? I could tell you, I'm on camp.
That's why it's good to
I don't
have
deal
this
with that
stuff
kind
in
of stuff,
place.
sure.
That's why it's good to have these
And I
established.
yeah, sure. And this can be established at any point in time.
So why not now, before we're behind the 8 ball?
But the only reason we would be behind the 8 ball is if we didn't start doing some of the stuff that the ordinance is pointing out, which we can without passing the ordinance.
The ordinance, I think, allows us, I'm sorry, the resolution.
Resolution,
The resolution allows us to present a unified front to the community to say, this is important and we should take this seriously. I believe that if we don't pass the ordinance and just ask our city manager and staff to start working on things, that will contribute to this concept that people are behaving hysterically based on different information. We have a COVID task force in town that is providing excellent advice to as many human beings as possible. And this would seem a logical next step. I don't think that the Board of Health wants to do anything immediately, but I think it is really important as we move. We're at the beginning of this, and communication is already all over the place. The more we can come together and communicate clearly as a body, as leaders in the community, as people who interact with all kinds of ages and makes and models of citizens, the better off we will all be. Communication is absolutely key in this process.
I think the speed at which this can move is really one of the defining factors, because you look at Italy, we're tracking about 2 weeks behind Italy, so 2 weeks from now, this could be a completely different conversation. In the meantime, the efforts we take now make all the difference. So we're telling people they need to change the way they live their lives, not interact with people like they're used to doing. How do you convey to them the importance of that? I think this is one way to do it. Maybe we'll luck out, and the measures we're taking now will mean we don't have the number of ICU patients that they have in Italy, and it's crushing their healthcare system. I mean, Seattle's facing this as well. So the actions our citizens take now will determine what we're facing 2 weeks from now. And so I hope it looks in 2 weeks as if we have overreacted. That would be the ideal outcome, but we just don't know.
I think we send a mixed message if the city manager is taking steps behind the scene and the commission does not approve it.
She is a little bit, but she would feel better if you guys, five of you said, and I mean, not without outside my authority.
Right,
But
absolutely.
it would be nice to have, to know that you guys are worried. Because in reality, most of my communication, as you guys know, has been with the mayor, and that's beneficial because he's also got he's got the connection with Avera, and so it's been a really nice fit. But we need all of you to have, not agree on everything, but have a similar direction for us to know how we're moving forward, or to pull us back if we're getting too far out in front.
I think this, social media is a terrible place to get information, and a lot of people rely on it. And so I think our excellent news reporting that happens locally can take this and be a voice of, this is solid information you can trust coming from a reasonable source, not something that you may or may not know where it's coming from on social media. So I think it helps. We need more of that. We need more good, solid communication to help state what is true and clear going forward.
Is there any other commission discussion? Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission?
Yeah, I would. I think you all know me, Doug Ekron. Maybe to your point about social media, I'll just share a couple of things that are circulating in the healthcare community. Number one, this is different than influenza. Now, for a lot of people, you may feel the same kinds of symptoms, but overall, the fatality rate, the death rate, is 34 times higher than influenza, and it is spread just as easily. And in particular, for our elderly and people that have underlying health conditions. So that can be really, really hard to control. I have seen messaging coming out of Italy where physicians, where they're running out of respirators or ventilators. So they are having to make choices, people in their 40s and 50s, who gets the ventilator and who doesn't. The message that I had, I've got 3 people, 2 in their 40s with children, 1 in their early 50s. I have 1 ventilator. The person I put on the ventilator has a chance to live, the other 2 do not. How do I make that decision? That's why we would support your acting now, because we've got to slow down the spread of this stuff. This is gonna be a marathon, not a sprint. And if we get a sprint and we get inundated with those patients, we simply don't have enough equipment and technology to keep people safe. We've got to spread this thing out. And I realize that's an economic issue. It's an economic issue for all of us, for small businesses, for large businesses, for government, etc. The stimulus package will help in some way, shape, or form, but it's not going to be enough. But our main concern right now is taking care of people and keeping them healthy. And so, and by spreading this out longer, because none of us have immunity to this. Nobody in the world has immunity to this. So at the current mortality rate, if we have 300 million Americans who get this virus, we would expect 12 million to die. So that's why we think we need to act today and not wait to see, does this really come or not. All of our bordering states, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, all have community transmitted cases confirmed. How long do we think we'll be exempt from that? That's my 2 cents.
Doug, a quick question, how are you feeling in the medical community and for the Yankton community itself? Are we as prepared as we can be for what could be an onslaught?
Yeah, we think so. Certainly the information, because we're learning a lot. This is a new disease. So information from the CDC, from the Department of Health, it gets updated literally several times a day. And so we've got mechanisms to share that across the Avera footprint and to share that in our local community with our other providers as well. And so we have those communications to ensure we're all on the same page. We're sending a consistent message to the community and to the patients who are presenting. We have the testing center open now at the Avera Surgical Hospital campus. We don't want people to just show up there. They need to go there because they've been sent there by their provider. And if you come there without that referral, we're going to send you away. Just because of the volume of the patients that we expect we will see. So a slow ramp up has been good for us to work through that and to keep our people safe. But we can't have contaminated people coming into our clinics and hospitals, because every time that happens, we have to shut the space down and that staff is out for 14 days, whether they come down with the virus or not. Well, if that happens 2 or 3 times and I lose 2 or 3 emergency room physicians and nurses and others that are supporting, we can't take care of the public for anything. We wouldn't be able to take care of the heart attack or the car accident, let alone the COVID case. So that's why this is so critical.
You talked a little bit about time frame. You have a 14-day period for it to work through your system, right? Now, is that, because I've seen things about, is it something you can catch again?
We don't know for sure. We don't think so. At least that's what I'm seeing the most of. But this hasn't been around long enough to get those studies. So do you catch it again, or you just get symptoms again? And so don't know the answer to that. And as we get more information, certainly we'll share that. But,
And then in a best case scenario, then it's a marathon, not a sprint. Are we talking a marathon that lasts 2 months, a marathon that lasts 8 months? I know, best guess, best case scenario.
yeah. I would just say no one knows. We don't have that guidance. I know that governors in Minnesota were talking about schools maybe being shut down for 4 weeks, and Iowa is talking about for 8 weeks. So most of the things that I see say we should plan on some type of disruption, don't know the extent of it, but to last probably 6 to 8 weeks. But that's conjecture at this point, I think. And that's if we're successful in flattening out this curve and having it spread more slowly so we can manage it.
Doug, the hospital and the senior living center have taken quite a few measures to restrict visitors. Do you want to talk about that, just so the community is aware of what
Yeah,
they're doing?
and we actually started at the Majestic Bluffs campus first and limiting visitation there, and so we're actually using iPads and FaceTime and things like that. Now there are exceptions, and when we get into an end-of-life situation, we'll work through that. We're screening all staff before they come out into the long-term care facility. So if they're having symptoms, then we need to do a deeper dive with those folks, because we just can't get this illness into our long-term care population. It is just devastating. One of the leaders of one of the long-term care associations in the U.S. last week described this virus as almost a perfect killing machine for the elderly. Okay, so we are taking measures to try to prevent that. And so from our vendors to families and visitors to our own staff, we're taking measures. On the hospital side, we're limiting it to 1 visitor per patient. So if I happen to be the patient and my wife is my visitor, she's my visitor. And so during the course of my hospital stay, we'd like the visitation limited to that 1 person. We know that won't always be the case. Sometimes if a parent's in, different children want to come in and see, but it's going to be 1 person at a time. We just have to limit that exposure, and you're going to have to be health screened before you come in. So we'll be extending that to our employees in all clinical areas as well.
Just think it's important for the public to realize what extreme measures are being taken in our healthcare facilities, so they understand the seriousness with which those who have a better understanding of the disease than most of us, how seriously they're taking that threat. We'll get to you.
I
That's
have
right.
another question.
Go ahead.
I'm curious, and I haven't heard it covered in the media, so it's more out of a curiosity. I'm happy to see the number of negative reported cases. It comes out, we had 145 negative cases, 10 positive. Is there something mimicking this, or they're just showing the symptoms, so we're just testing them to be careful?
Okay. That's our challenge, is we have people that show up with a cough and fever. Well, is it COVID or is it influenza?
Okay.
And so, a lot of patients are doing respiratory testing, maybe an influenza test as well as COVID, depending on the history. But we're gonna, right now, travel is an important factor in that. At some point, travel won't be, because we'll have community spread, and that travel piece will become less significant. At least for the point now where we have enough tests in South Dakota. For a while, that was a very real concern, and you could only get tested if the Department of Health approved that, and now they're leaving that up to the providers to make that decision, because we've got more tests in the state.
Any questions for Doug? Thank you, Doug, for being here to share that information. Corey, did you?
I did actually have a question, just as a member of the public. I know that when people are all isolated and everything, paranoid and gone rampant, will this health board and health officer have some sort of public meetings or something, so that, I mean, if everyone's in their house, they can't come here?
No, we won't have public meetings, but what we'll probably likely do is have a way for people to interact with the meeting. And so it'll allow the press to, probably a Facebook Live type situation, but no, we're not, that would defeat the purpose of staying away from each other. So we'll make them available to the public and open for, we won't be closed door meetings, but,
So it'll be open to the public and maybe streamed or something?
we'll live stream them and.
People might be able to email questions, or who knows, something like that.
Yeah, we haven't set that structure up yet, but we'll make it, public input part of that, part of that process. I just, it would be one of those types of things where I think a lot of people would have interest, and having 50 or 75 people show up would defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do, so.
But it would allay fears if people kind of knew it was coming before decisions were made, or pipe in maybe possibly helpful comments. something to consider might be setting up a regular time for public health board updates at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so people at home who don't have internet know that they can turn on their radio and hear exactly what's happening. We have a lot of seniors that don't have access to internet.
I've thought of that, again, part of that will depend upon who's on that board and
Mhm.
what's available and who's available. But we'll make sure we, also, we'll need to rely on our media friends to help us get that information out as well to people, but, we're starting to put those pieces together.
If I could make a suggestion too, you mentioned, having Nathan as mayor on there. Just some thought as you're thinking about putting this group together. Nathan's been doing a great job. But as you talk about these 1 or 2 layers deep, would it be wise to think about another city commissioner, whether it's ex officio or whatever, to sit on there?
Yeah.
Should Nathan get sick, then we're
Yeah.
without city commission
Yeah.
representation.
Yeah, regardless of whether or not I see somebody as an ex officio from the, or maybe we just have that 3D plan. Yeah, and we'll probably do the same thing with most of the members. I hate to, make
Well, what
it-
you don't want is to get to a committee where you have 25 or 30 people in
Right.
the room. Like you said, it defeats it, but I think to put some thought in what that is, so that it's
Yeah.
effectively represented, but
And
not over.
I'm guessing there's folks that would like to have some of these answers, tomorrow, but I wanna give this some, because this health board does have power to give some, ability to give you a lot of powerful, recommendations, do a lot of really, important things and things that could really change the scope of our community, so I wanna make sure that I'm real careful about who those folks are.
Any other input from the audience? Any more commission discussion? Now let's have roll call.
Sarda.
Aye.
Burdick.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Mosier.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much, everyone. We do have other business, and I guess during this time, I would like to also do something unusual and invite the media to ask questions, because I think our answers might be beneficial if we all hear them, so we would like to hear what questions you have at this time.
So if the state puts out restrictions on curfews, bar closings, that type of stuff, is the city able to enforce that, or how would that work?
Well, that would probably most likely run through that health board or make a recommendation to the commission, and if the commission would agree, enforcement is gonna be an issue on anything, I suppose attached to that, Ross, it would be enforceable by law, so somebody could be charged if they
There,
didn't follow the procedure.
yes, there's statutes that allow for enforcement under the right types of conditions. One of them is recommendations trying to halt the spread of a SARS-based illness, which is what this is, and that subjects property owner who's violating a recommendation, or an individual who's refusing to follow quarantine or something like that. Criminal penalties, class 1 misdemeanor, punishable by up to a year in jail. So but again, that's, if you can cite somebody and charge them, that's not as good as being able to lock them in their homes, so.
We don't have the manpower to do more than police regular, business, regular things that occur, so it'd be difficult. However, I do feel like, as a community, most folks do the right thing based on a recommendation, and then if there is a little bit more teeth behind it, even more people would say, oh, that makes sense to me, or if we don't do this, we could be subject to, we're breaking the law. I think that gives it, more levity as well, but, no, we don't have any, we don't have there isn't anything we can do. I think though, that's a good process to follow, having a recommendation from the governor through to the local communities.
Would that apply also to private gatherings of groups of people, funerals,
Yeah.
weddings, retirement parties?
I don't know the answer to that, Scott. We would have to, again, part of the reason why I really like to have somebody that has, medical background, is talk to them about those things. Is a restaurant different than a funeral? Just to have that help
Are
and make
you looking at 3 people initially to be on that board then? Or not a specific number?
I don't have a specific number because, I certainly want somebody that has medical background, but I also feel like there's some folks that have some really good, information about public health in general, like our code enforcement people. And then also I think it's important to have, folks that are just good decision makers, that have that, just common sense that is helpful when, you're faced with, so there might be a community member not related to the city commission or city offices at all that I might want to consider. So I'm going to give that a lot of careful thought, which is kind of why I asked today for the commission to give me a little bit of time, if we have it, if it looks like we have it, to think about who's the right fit to be on that board.
Scott, to your question about funerals, weddings, retirement parties, those are probably almost more risky activities than meeting in a restaurant, just because what do you do at those events? You all know each other typically, so you're hugging, you're handshaking, maybe some kissing here and there, and food. So people really need to think through those events, if they need to have them now, or if they can delay them, and if they are going to have them, what measures are they taking to give their attendees permission to do social distancing? It may be awkward, but that's really what we need to be thinking about right now. Any other questions?
There's still a certain number of people that think this is a hoax. Is this perhaps some way to break through that, doing this?
Well, I would get my dander up a little bit on that, Jerry. We've had our physicians and our nurses who take care of us, who we trust. And I suppose I'm a little bit biased, but I thought this before I was biased. I think we have some of the best doctors in the world. They're Mayo trained here in our community. And when they're giving us these recommendations, we better be listening. Anybody who calls it a hoax, I call them a liar, and that they're just not paying attention.
I guess that you should see my emails.
And I've seen those same things, Jerry, and this would have to be a global hoax, which is, I don't know how you wrap your mind around that, but I wish people could see the preparations that are happening within our healthcare communities, because their lives for the last week or so have been nonstop preparation for what could be coming, based on what they've seen in Italy, France, South Korea, China, all those places who have already experienced it. It's not like it's a mystery as to what happens. It has played out in other locations already. We know what's coming. So the seriousness with which they're taking it is very eye-opening, and just a testament to how seriously we need to take it as a public health issue.
Nathan, tell us about the urgency with which, I guess, your thought process on that. Why is it so important to get this resolution passed now, today, and not wait?
Again, it's a question of public health. And these are issues that if you went back 100 years, they probably had to deal with pretty regularly. You'd have outbreaks of disease within Yankton or regions. We haven't had to do that for a long time, so this seems very strange to us. We're asking people to disrupt their daily lives, not interact with one another like they usually would. What we do now really determines what happens a week from now, 2 weeks from now. Because in these other countries, what we've seen is the numbers do start off low, but then as you have people gathering and spreading the disease, all of a sudden, exponentially, it grows into a systemic problem. Once you get to a systemic problem, that's when you start having collapses, where your healthcare system is overloaded, people cannot get the care they need because we simply don't have enough equipment. Because like any business, our healthcare system in this country is equipped to deal with small peaks beyond what's normal, but they don't necessarily plan every day for pandemics. And so that's the reality we face, and I don't think that's the fault of our healthcare community across the country. That's reality, and so we need to help them, and this is the way we can do it, by taking serious steps on an individual level, encouraged by our local government, state government, federal government, so that people know that they're not being silly in not going to events or not holding events. It's something they need to do for the public health.
There's a note here, 6 counties in the San Francisco area now just been placed on a shelter-in-place order. Can't leave their homes.
Do we know how many test kits are available? Is that changing every day, I imagine, or?
I know the state just received another shipment, I don't know what they're total.
And I assume they're continuing to receive.
Yeah, I would expect that they would, as our process is, we take the samples and prepare them and then send them into the state. And it's 24 to 48 hours before we get the results back. I think that will improve over time. Testing will improve probably over the next few weeks, actually, that we'll be able to shorten that turnaround time.
Yeah, right now, all the testing is being centralized in the lab in Pier, but hopefully as we go on, there will be decentralized testing, so there'll be more testing sites, faster turnaround. That would be our hope, based on what we are hearing. Any other questions? Then, there being no other business, I would ask for a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss contractual litigation and personnel matters under South Dakota Codified Law 1-25-2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Again, thank you everyone for attending today and bearing with us through this unusual circumstance.
Do you expect any action out of this executive session?
We do not expect action.
So when do you consider